Hey buddy, it's Peter, and in this video we're going to look at the 2023 Z lineup from Kawasaki. Now I know there's a couple missing, and I know that this color scheme is a 2022, but this will work. What I want to try to do is show you the things that the other videos aren't showing you and talk about some of those things, because from a spec sheet I think we can look at these bikes and understand the differences, but when you're looking to buy a bike, you may want to know a little bit better about what one adds over the other, what the lower trim level has, the higher trim levels don't, and things like that. And I think there's a lot left out in describing these three bikes in particular that I'd like to make sure I cover so that you can have a better information and better idea of what you're into. Now, first of all, there's a couple things. The Z125 I don't have in this video. I did do a video of that if you're interested in it, and I'll do more videos on it as well, but I didn't include that in this comparison. And there's the Z or the H2, which is a Z model bike as well, the hyper sport bike, which I don't have included here, just because I feel like these are sort of the mainstream Z models, and they really represent a lot of the Kawasaki lineup. Now, first of all, Kawasaki lineup, I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, and if you have questions about any of these bikes, make sure you hit subscribe and let me know the types of things you want to know, because I have complete access to the entire vehicle lineup here at this dealership, and my job is to make sure that I continue to make content with information so we have a database of information here for you so that you get the information that you want. So let me know in the comments the things you want to know. If you own these bikes, let's fill the comments with tell me what your experience is with them. And of course, I can come back to those comments, answer them in the comments and in future videos to make sure I give you the information you want. So let's start with the lineup here. We're going to start with the 400, work our way to the 600 and the 900, or 650 and 900, and we're going to talk about things that probably some of the other videos don't talk about. So if I don't hit on everything, that might be intentional, but again, I can come back to them again and again. Let's get rolling. All right, starting with the Z400, this is sort of an entry-level bike, but the benefit of this 400 is it's really, really special. If you do your research online, you know, there's always people that are going to tell you that the 400 isn't big enough, isn't fast enough, isn't whatever enough. A lot of those people aren't really the target market for this bike. What you'll find is a lot of experienced riders, people who ride a lot of bikes and have a lot of experience in a whole bunch of bikes, find that this is a really great bike, not just for beginners, but also for non-beginners. So let's just start with the Z lineup. A couple things you get. First of all, you have a fairly upright seating position, which is a really strong point here. You can see me sitting across here. I have size 11 feet, and the one thing I find if I put my feet too far back, my heel is on this heat shield. But again, putting the foot peg where it should be on my foot, it's totally fine. The one thing you'll find with this bike is it's a little bit more compact than the other models in the lineup. In the Kawasaki lineup, the 400 series is available in two models, the Ninja 400 and the Z400. And I've got lots of videos comparing the two, lots of videos on either of those bikes. The real difference between the two, the Ninja and this, is really just the handlebar area. Put your mirrors a little bit closer. The headlight and the instrument cluster turn with your handlebars, and the fairing gives you a different look. It does not really make you any more uncomfortable on the Ninja. The Ninja simply has handlebars that come in a little bit more like this. So it's a little bit different style out there, but from the tank back, it's the exact same bike. The front fork angle, the frame, all of that is the exact same. So you're really getting something like a Ninja with a different look here. And with these bar risers, you could, change up the geometry if you want to. It's pretty typical to have some risers in there, do that kind of thing if you really wanted to. But overall, you want a slight forward lean into a bike like this. The wind's going to help sort of take some pressure off your hands, but as you can see, it's very upright. It is not a super sport bike where you're down like this, and that's the real appeal of these Z bikes. Can you wheelie with this? Yes, you can. Will you accidentally wheelie with this? Probably not. A very approachable bike. But if you're going to learn to drive on a racetrack, this and the Ninja 400 are both capable of doing that. I happen to like the little bit wider spread here of this, but let's just talk really briefly about the engine. 400cc bikes, they used to be not very strong, not very powerful. This has about 45 horsepower, which is pretty good. In comparison to the 650, that's about 67 horsepower. And in comparison to the Z900, that's about 127 horsepower. So obviously a whole different range, but 45 horsepower is pretty good. You used to have much, much bigger bikes. In fact, something like the Vulcan 900 Cruiser only has about 50 horsepower. So very good horsepower in a very lightweight bike. The benefit with a bike like this is that it's kind of like the Mazda Miata, the, maybe Volkswagen GTI. There are more powerful cars out there, but this is really playful, and you know, as a motorcycle, it's very playful and powerful enough. So one thing you will not find in the bigger bikes is the playfulness of this. If the only way you can get a smile is to go really, really, really fast, this probably isn't your bike. But there's lots of videos on YouTube of this thing going just about 200 kilometers an hour. So, you know, this thing's capable of going plenty fast, it's capable of highway speeds, it's capable of doing everything you would want as a motorcycle. But even at road legal speeds, it is a lot of fun, and that's why a lot of people love this. Most competitors don't have a bike like this. Other manufacturers, even their 500cc bikes, really aren't any more powerful. They're significantly heavier, so they're just less fun. And that's the thing with this, is it's a lot of fun. A couple things you're going to find here: 17-inch wheels front and rear, which is typical stuff for any kind of sport bike. A single disc on this bike, so it's a very large disc, which is partly for styling, partly for braking, but it only has a single disc on the front, single disc on the rear. Single disc on the rear is going to be standard across motorcycling, but as you move up, you'll get a double disc. Let's take a look at the 650 now, and I'll start talking about some of the specifics that it adds that this one doesn't have, and we'll kind of tie this all together as you keep watching through. We'll tie it all together at the end. So stay with me, we'll go 650, 900, and we'll start tying things together as we go through. So taking a look at the Z650, the 650 is interesting because while the 400 is really only the Z400 and the Ninja 400, the 650, they make a bike for everyone in every style, whether it's a cruiser, whether it's a long distance tourer, whether it's various levels of sport bike or naked bike like this. There is literally this engine in every style of bike, and that's because it is a great street engine. So both the 400 and the 650 are bikes that I'm comfortable recommending to beginners. Usually I lean towards that 400, but this one has some features there I think that can help a new rider that it didn't have in the past. So moving up to this one, you have a number of nice features. You have traction control that is now standard for 2023. I should point out the previous 400, it's a different color scheme because that was a 2022, but it's a carryover bike. Traction control isn't really necessary on something like this. You're still not going to likely accidentally wheelie. You're not going to power wheelie or something like that. But certainly in slippery weather, that can be an issue. And if you're dumping the clutch and doing those kind of things, that can be an issue as well. So traction control has 3 levels. There's an off, a level 1, and a level 2. So you maybe consider that to be 2 levels of traction control, but 3 settings. Off is perfectly fine to drive this bike like that. I would usually drive it in level 1, and level 2 is great when you have a slippery road condition or if you're just learning and getting used to things. Level 2 just gives you a little bit more control of that power if it does get slippery. All of these bikes have ABS brakes, which is nice. This one also moves up to a digital dash. We're going to show you the dash on the 900 when we get going here, but the dash is an improvement. You have dual disc brakes here, both sides here, so you have more braking power, and you have a more comfortable seat. Let's show you that seating position again. Very, very similar to the 400. You're sitting fairly upright. The thing you're going to find with this bike is it feels very lightweight. It is heavier than the 400, but they do a lot of things on all of these bikes to keep the weight centralized and low. So we're going to zoom into that in 1 second here. But overall seating position, again, right here, very good. You do have a little bit more room here. It is a little bit longer bike, just by a couple inches, but that does give you a little bit more space. So while the rider triangle is kind of the same, you do feel a little bit more spacious, and it feels narrow the way the tank's carved out, all good things. The other thing that's nice is you can see I'm about 6 feet tall. That bike is a little shorter. The 400 that I'm pointing to that you can't see on screen is a little shorter. This one's a hair taller, but a very approachable bike for all types of riders, whether you're shorter or taller. And then this one does include the levers here, both clutch lever and brake lever, that are adjustable, so they can move closer or farther from you. A very simple adjustment here, just a dial knob, push it out, and it's done. So you can adjust it on the fly just for comfort, or you can adjust it for different size people. So again, really good that way. Let's put it on the side stand. We're going to start digging into a couple little things on this bike that I want to show you that carry over to the 900. So let's zoom in closer to this one, show you what it has that the 400 doesn't, that may make a difference, and we'll also carry some of those things to the 900. Let's take a look. So let's talk about one difference that's a little bit more obvious. Maybe you've already noticed it. There is no exhaust coming up here. So on a modern bike, the catalytic converter is underneath there. It does a lot of the emissions control for you as well as the sound muffling, and you really don't need an exhaust up here. So the Ninja 400 or the Z400 has a fairly large exhaust up here. So how is this bike heavier when you're walking it around, but doesn't feel much heavier when you're sitting on it? Well, part of it is something like this. This weight is down low. It doesn't bring that weight up here. That does a number of things for you. One, it gives you a little bit more foot room, obviously. You had a little bit tighter foot room on the 400. Two, it's down low and underneath, which keeps the weight down low, which keeps that center of gravity lower. Now there's another difference in here that you can't see from the angle I'm filming on, but the Ninja 400 has a shock up and down like this in this area. Again, you couldn't see it really on the angle I was filming at. This one is the horizontal back link suspension. So the suspension runs in here. It gives you a little bit of a longer shock. It's not about travel, but just more of a shock in there. And it also moves that weight forward and lower. That's what they do in their sport bikes. So again, you're starting to get a little bit more advanced suspension. You're starting to take advantage of some of the design abilities of, a little bit more expensive bike to allow you to do all the work down here instead of having a muffler up here. It gives you a cool design over here. We talked about ABS brakes front and rear. The other thing you're getting in the 650 is an upgrade in tires. These Road Sport 2 tires, the size is different between all different bikes, but these are the same tires as used on the Z900 that we'll show you in a second here. So you're getting an upgrade in tires, you're getting that traction control, you've got some weight management things that even though this is a heavier bike, it feels nice and light and nimble while you're riding, and it stays as a 2-cylinder, like I said, around that 67 horsepower. In North America, they don't advertise the horsepower on these, but you do have that there. The other little thing here is you've got some rubber-mounted pegs for both passenger and the driver here, which are going to help with a little bit of vibrations. You don't have that in the 400. So it's a little bit of an upgrade there. In addition to the digital dash, we're going to show you the digital dash on the 900. Let's pull the 900 in here first and we'll talk about that. So moving to the Z900, you're dealing with a whole different class. This is no longer a beginner bike. Like we said, the first one around 45 horsepower and then around 67 horsepower. This one's up to about 127 or so horsepower. So a significant jump in horsepower, significant jump in torque, and that's really the difference here. The other two bikes, they both have a Ninja counterpart, but it's Ninja in name more than everything else. It's, they're styling exercises versus a true different bike. The Z900 does not have a Ninja counterpart. The only counterpart to this is the Z900 RS, which actually makes less horsepower. It's a retro style bike, and it's actually the bike that I own and that I bought. It's a different animal, but it's very, very similar. So what you have here is a wider bike, and that makes sense because there's 4 cylinders across here, and you've got that more power to deal with. But you have some similarities as well. This paint scheme, for instance, is available on the Z650. The only difference is that one has black wheels here, so it's a kind of a nice paint scheme with the green frame there. It looks very similar, but again, whole different vehicle. So let's talk about some of the differences in here that you get. First of all, let's just jump on for seating position. Jumping across this, you can feel it's a heavier bike and it's also a taller bike, but the seating position, again, very similar. You do notice, even though the tank carves in, that you're a little bit wider here. It's a wider, heavier bike. And again, if you're comparing a Super Sport to this, or a Ninja version, what's interesting is the ZX6R is a similar horsepower bike, but not nearly the same amount of torque. So while you have an upright riding position, unlike that ZX6R, you really have the speed and more torque, and the torque makes it more drivable in everyday around town type things. So we talked about tires. Let's start with those tires. The same exact size tire between this and the Z650, which is interesting to most people. You have the dual brakes here, cloud discs on both sides here. The difference on the rear tire, though, is this one is wider. It's about 180 millimeters, fairly wide tire. 190, I think, is the largest one you can get on a Kawasaki sport bike. So, pretty wide. It's only a centimeter wider on the very largest, but a fairly large rear tire there. And that's really what it is. It's bigger everywhere. We're going to show you the dash in a second, but let's talk about the suspension. You also step up to adjustable suspension here. Even though it's adjustable, in its stock form, this is a firmer riding bike. So think about a sports car, something like driving in a Porsche versus driving in a sporty car that's in the mainstream. That's a little bit more what this is like. This is very much similar to something like a Porsche. Firmer riding, adjustable suspension. If you do take this to the track, you can really firm up the suspension. You can soften it out. You can adjust the way it reacts to different bumps, both the up and down reactions of the suspension. And if you're into really tuning your ride, or you get to know motorcycling more, that's something that you can really customize, not just for yourself, but the types of roads that you ride or the types of riding you're doing, whether it's a racetrack, on the road, that kind of thing. There is a model above this that has an Öhlins shock and a little bit different tweaked front suspension, the Öhlins rear shock. That is available in the SE, and that is available in the Z900 RS, that retro sport model, and in this model. The big thing with this bike is it's a true sport bike with upright riding position with a lot more torque than a typical sport bike, but it also is something that is playful still in its own right. So let's take a closer look and talk about some of those details. So starting at the front here, we did talk about the potential upgrade to an Öhlins suspension on this in the SE model. You also, in that SE model, get Brembo brakes. So while this one doesn't have the Brembo brakes, you can upgrade to that, and that's a real difference in performance that you don't have on something like the 650 class. The other thing you're gonna notice is these forks are what they call upside down forks. So what it means is the suspension is moving in this section instead of moving in this section, and what that does for you is gives you less unsprung weight. So if you're not picking up the differences on this one yet, the biggest difference is a level of performance. This is a performance bike. Now, what's interesting about the Z900 is it's also a really, really good value in the motorcycling world. When you talk about power and features and everything else, this one really does well. So here, 4 cylinders there. So instead of the 2 cylinders, it's 4. Of course, all these bikes are liquid cooled, so that's kind of thing. You'll notice it's a little bit more beefy through here, but you still have some of that same stuff you saw on the 650. Underneath here, there's a large catalytic converter. That's going to do your emissions control. That's going to do a lot of your stuff, but you still have a pipe on this one. It sounds really nice, and again, that 4-cylinder is a super, super smooth engine that revs quickly, builds power quickly, makes a lot of power. This is a bike that will wheelie. It is something that can do that, and it can power wheelie. So again, traction control is important, and this has traction control. It also has rider modes. You can see that big, long suspension in here. Starts back here, goes all the way up to over in this area here, and again, it's that forward-leaning design that centralizes the weight there. So you've got all that. And again, you're stepping back into performance a little bit here. So because the bike is smoother, you don't have those rubber foot pegs here, but it's also about weight savings here. You've got the rubber mounted pegs there to help with vibration. But again, a little bit more leaning towards a sport performance vehicle than something that's more of an everyday rider. You can absolutely ride this every day, but like I said, it's kind of like driving a Porsche every day. It's not designed for pure comfort, it's designed for performance and comfort. So now let's take a look at this TFT display. Now, first thing is when I'm filming a display, you can see there's a lot of glare in there. I don't see as much glare in person as you see on a camera. It's just one of those things when you're filming a display like this, it does show some glare. But what's great about the TFT display is when I turn it on here, you can see that even though I've set it up with a lot of glare here, you can very clearly see things. And again, even clearer with my own eyes than you can with something like a camera filming this. So this is the display that essentially is on the 650 and the 900. Now the difference here is you have drive modes here. So you have sports, you have rain, you have rider, a number of ride modes there for the Z900. The Z650 only has the traction control settings. Now they both have traction control. They can both be set for a couple different levels. So level 1, level 2, or off for traction control. But again, the rider modes also can control some of that traction control with some other things as well. So you've got that advancement there. But the rest of the display is essentially the same. There's a few different options down here, and you can control it with the buttons over here. But you can also control them with your thumb on the shifter, which we'll show you in a second here. So a couple cool things about this display. First of all, you can see right there, it is a black screen with white lettering, or at least a white speedometer. You can invert those colors, so it can be a white screen with black lettering. I happen to like it like this. I think it matches not only the bike, but it just makes it easier to read for me. And then you have the tachometer here, which is pretty cool. It runs up to about 11,000 RPM, but when you have this digital tachometer, you can set it to flash at any point. So if you want to make sure it's flashing at you at 8,000 RPM to make sure you shift, or when you're braking in the bike, maybe you want to set it up to flash a little bit lower. So even at a glance, you can tell when you've set it up for you to flash. The other big benefit here is you have the ability to connect an app to this that can give you things like email and text notifications on your screen there. allow you to have some access to the bike through your cell phone, which is kind of handy. And then of course you have a clear display of all your things. So we're going to look at the odometer right there. We can switch that right there from odometer to trip A to trip B. We'll go back to odometer, and then on the bottom display as well, it's currently set up to read instant fuel efficiency. Now it's set up for kilometers per liter. You can do liters per 100 kilometers. You can do miles per gallon US, miles per gallon UK, lots of things. But we've got the instant and average, which we have you right there. Then you have your overall range. Once you're driving, this will give you a rough driving range of fuel you have left before you need to get fuel. And then you have your average speed in here, total time, and then you have the battery, which is currently at 12.2 volts, and back to fuel efficiency. You can see with the fuel gauge here, you also have some extra display things that are kind of nice. Obviously, you've got a bar for each level of fuel. Once it gets down to the last bar, that is a solid bar that stays like that. And then as you really need fuel, then it starts to flash. You can see this one's very, very low. And again, this TFT display really adds, and this is the same on the 650 and the 900. It really is a nice step up. Let's take a look at the controls on the left side here, which again, very similar between the 650 and the 900. Taking a look at the controls here, you have some things. Again, this is all identical between the 650. Actually, everything you see is identical between the 650 and this bike. And all of the bikes will have a little trigger over here to flash your high beam. So typical stuff on all these bikes. All of them can flash a high beam with a trigger, turn on your high beams there, signal lights, horn. And then the 650 and the 900 have the hazard warning lights, the four-way flashers, and also this switch here. This switch here, upper side here, controls the things like the odometer I just showed you, odometer, trip B, trip A. And then this one here controlled the lower display, so fuel efficiency, range, all those kinds of things. And the select button can change driver modes or traction control, as well as some other functions in there. And then you can see this one has the adjustable levers here. All of these bikes have a slipper and assist clutch, so you can adjust these for length with this, and the slipper and assist clutch means that all of these bikes have a light clutch pull, and if you mess up a downshift and shift too aggressively, instead of your rear wheel spinning, this bike is capable of allowing the clutch to spin a little bit extra instead, or slip a little bit extra instead, to keep your wheel in contact with the ground. That's a racetrack performance thing that's great for beginner riders, great for aggressive riders. It just keeps traction in control. So lots to show you over here, but again, simple stuff to use. All right, so now that we've gone through the whole lineup, let's talk about which bike is best for who. And again, that Z lineup, the naked lineup is what they call it now, used to be what they called the standard bikes. They just have a little more aggressive styling now, but standard being a sort of upright seating position that's comfortable for long runs but still sporty. That's where these bikes live. So the 400, obviously excellent for beginners, but not just for beginners. The one thing you lose when you move away from this bike is that lightweight playfulness that you have at any speed. The Z900 at 40, 50, 60 kilometers an hour is not as fun as this bike. 60, 70, 80, maybe still not as fun, but it comes into its own, and it needs speed to have some real fun and fun playfulness. So this bike, although entry-level bike, and there are some entry-level components, like I said, the smaller disc brake is all you need, or the single disc brake is all you need, but of course not having a second one does save some cost. And really, the cost savings probably doesn't matter too much, because you're getting a really good value here, and you're getting a bike that's cheaper to insure. That 400cc class is cheaper to insure. And like I said, a lot of 500cc bikes don't make the power to weight ratio that this does, and actually don't make much more power, if any more power, than this. So that 400 class, when I grew up, 400 classes were pretty weak bikes. Not so much anymore. So comfortable, has a lot of fun, really good value. Once you move into the Z650, Kawasaki uses this engine in just about everything, because I like to call this engine the perfect street sport engine. So when they put it in the Vulcan S, which is a cruiser, they call it the Sport Cruiser. It's got all the power you need to have fun. You're gonna shift a little bit less through town because you've got a little bit more torque range, a little more horsepower range to work with. But if you're doing longer highway runs, you've got all the power you need. Taking an extra passenger, again, not a problem on longer trips. And all of these bikes can take passengers, but adding a little bit more power does make things a little bit easier to do something like that. You've still got some cost-saving components in here, but really what you're dealing with within its class, this is a ultra competitive bike and a great value. Once you move to the Z900, it does cost more, but there's really less cost savings overall. You've got really high-end components, so you've got the adjustable suspension. For some people, if you're never going to adjust it, you may not feel the benefit of the adjustable suspension, but you may feel the benefit of that quality of suspension, especially when you're sport riding. This bike rides firmer, rides sportier. It is a sporty overall vehicle. It's not going to be for everyone because it is so performance focused. For a lot of people, this bike might be more fun for you even though it makes less power. The 4-cylinder really adds a lot of power, so you're going to have to manage that power through town. You're going to have to be a little more careful with this. But again, if you want a performance bike, this is absolutely loaded with performance. So I bought a Z900 RS SE. It's not like this is too much to have for the street. It's great for the street. If you want a Ninja comparable to this, it doesn't really have one. Each of these has an exact Ninja comparable bike. It's the same frame, the same wheels, tires, the same geometry pretty much, different handlebars on both, and very, very similar riding position. Each bike has its own benefit, and maybe there's something I left out that you want to know about. Let me know in the comments section what you want to know about these bikes and which one you want me to dive further into. Like I said, I've done videos of each of these bikes individually, but I'm going to continue to make more and more videos to make sure you get the information you need. So if you have questions, let me know. Make sure you hit subscribe, and we'll continue to make more videos for you. Thanks everybody for watching.